Good morning everyone. It's Wednesday today. No, it's not, it's Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. And it's lashing it down with rain outside, which is becoming a common occurrence. We had a lovely heat wave 2 or 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And now we're back to cold, wet Devon weather. So yeah, the weather in Devon never ceases to amaze me. You can have blazing sunshine, an hour later wind and rain, an hour later blazing sunshine, blizzards. It just is so changeable. Right, so one of the speakers is together. The new mid-range looks lovely in here. The new tweeter looks lovely. Yeah, aesthetically everything is really good. So I've put one speaker back together. I've taken the original crossovers out because I am going to quickly connect them up and just see straight out the box how these drivers work with the original crossover. I'm sure I'm going to have to do no end of changes to it, and probably for this I will do a new crossover because I also want to change the crossover points and bits and pieces as well. So for the time being I've connected the woofer to the binding post at the back. I've got my cables for the mid-range coming out, the convenient little 2 locating peg holes, which is quite handy. So I've just loosened off the screws because I've got a felt gasket round here. I can get the cables through, and when I tighten these back up it's airtight again. And the cables for the new tweeter coming out through the foam of the woofer there. So that's all connected to my crossover board up here. Yeah, ready to go. So the speaker and the microphone, the center of this is kind of in the center of the room, so the room reflections are a bit more predictable. I can see those in the impulse response, so I know this room quite well. If I see any dips sort of 500 Hertz and lower, 9 times out of 10 I know it's just the room. Because these are a floor standing speaker, and really I want to measure them this way, there's going to be the direct sound to the microphone plus a slightly delayed floor bounce that some foam wedges tend to really push down, so I can still then gate quite low. I've put my sheets up. Some people ask, why do you do this when you're gating your measurements? Well, it's really to slow the air down in the room, which just seems to give me more resolution in my measurements. The sound has to travel through these thick blankets. It will reflect and come back. Every time it's going through those blankets, it's being attenuated, so it really helps. And you can just tell the difference when you clap your hand. The echo has gone completely. So it just makes things a little bit more accurate, and it's nice and quiet in here. Helps me think. So microphone set up at 1 meter, which is kind of the standard thing. So I hope this works out because they really look the part. And yeah, I'm hoping they don't just look good, but they sound and will integrate well with the woofer. Because to a point we're kind of making a new speaker here. Right, let's see what we can do. So there's a little look at the front of the speaker. The tweeter and the new mid-range look lovely in there. I've painted the, as you saw in the previous video, the bezel for the mid-range. I've also resprayed all the little clips. So it's looking tidy, it really is. So I've got the trusty crossover board out, so that gives me access to my tweeter, mid-range and woofer, positive and negative rails, loads of components, my jump leads, capacitors and resistors, more up there for testing, and I've got access to all of my little drawers there full of new components as well. A few people ask, and they seem to get a bit shirty about it. Oh, you're just playing around. Why don't you make RCL boxes? So you've got a switch to click in different resistors and different inductors. Yeah, I've definitely considered that, but it's a hell of a lot of work, and plus the range of values I use is enormous. I just don't really think it's practical. It's not that I haven't considered it. I've really thought about building a big bench with switches and all sorts of things, so I can pretty much not have to jump anything in, even if I'm using boxes with switches and resistors, capacitors, inductors in them. I've still got to jump them around. So yeah, I've thought about all permutations of that, but I just don't think it's practical. I really don't. And also I like to test with the components that I'm going to actually end up using. If I was to build a resistor box, a couple of them, because I'd need, you know, let's take a tweeter circuit. I might have a resistor at the front of the network, perhaps a resistor across the tweeter, so like an L-pad arrangement. I might have a resistor on the inductor. That's 3 boxes already. Then I might have a second order filter, so I'd have a box with capacitors, another box with inductors, and then if I'm making that a third order, I could have 2 capacitor boxes. So now you've got 1 box, 2 box, 3 box, 4 box, 5 box, potentially 6 boxes, and that's assuming the values in those boxes you've made are the values you're probably going to need. You'll need every value from, let's say, 1 microfarad up to 10 microfarad. I just don't think it's practical, but yeah, hopefully that answers that question that often comes up. Right, excuse the way I'm recording this. One day I will get a screen recording app for the PC. So that line I've highlighted is one of Steve's original measurements. So I've just loaded up the file I used before, and that is typically how a 66 measures. When I did the initial measurements, they were quite quick and crude, but really just to find out what was going on. That was the other one, so they were largely the same. I think this one was a little bit better behaved than the other. So just plugging in the new crossover, I get that, which is not great at all. But then I wasn't expecting it to be. This is why you can't just swap drivers for something completely different in a speaker and expect it to work, unless they're the same. So there are things that I'm liking straight away, and that is the integration with the woofer around this sort of area here. If I turn off Steve's original ones, up to around 1.2 kilohertz, things are really good. So obviously I need to work on that mid-range quite a lot. It's playing much louder, and same with our tweeter as well. So yeah, there's a few things to sort of work on there. If I have to start from scratch, that's exactly what I will do, and I'm kind of expecting to. So next thing I'll do is just to take raw driver measurements so I can really see what's going on with each driver, and then go from there. But yeah, there's some promise there. Right, I've been probably designing this crossover for 3 or 4 hours now, and largely it's right. So I'm now revisiting each driver and just picking away at the little kind of fine tweaks on the values and things like that. But in terms of the layout of the crossover, it's pretty much there. But I think I've probably got another few hours on this, and then it's going to be listening over the weekend and some final tweaks before they go home. But yeah, I'll put you on the tripod and you can have a quick listen. Yeah, there's no getting away from how punchy that bass is. But this mid is working lovely. Tweeter's working really well. I have had to add some correction to the tweeter. The mid is largely pretty much there. So yeah, after like 3 hours, 4 hours of working on the crossover, I've kept the woofer circuit the same. I'm now at the point where I'm just going back to each individual driver and just addressing little things. So yeah, it's working well. Right, it's 2:15, so I've been at this since about 9 o'clock, and it's taken quite a lot of doing. As I just mentioned, I got the crossover topology about right quite quickly. So when I say that, I mean the order of filters I'm using on each driver. What I've done is kept the original woofer circuit because it's quite steep and it rolls off at around 400 hertz. Perfect for our new mid, so I wanted to kind of keep that really. They're big value inductors as well, so yeah, I've ended up modifying the woofer circuit slightly, just with a cluster of resistors across it, just to bring the upper part of it down a little bit, because I've sacrificed a little bit of sensitivity, only a couple of dB, to just get a really nice flat response. And listening to these, I know I played a little sound clip, but listening to male and female vocals on this, even though it's just mono quickly, it's just really nice, really good. So really looking forward to getting these together and listening to them. Right, so yeah, like I say, second order high and low pass on my mid-range. It's behaved really well. I've just had to tweak around with the values to get those right. A resistor on my shunt capacitor for the low pass part, just to pull down a crown. Tweeter circuit is a third order filter, but I have had to use an RCL network in series with a tweeter, just to tame out a peak that's at the top. It's too much of a peak to clip it out with a capacitor, so I really need to use an inductor, which does cause a roll off at the top, which is what I want, but it also causes a knee in the kind of response below it. So a resistor across it and a capacitor to sort that out worked really well. So yeah, I'm going to take some final measurements now, and then I can go through what I've done. Whilst I'm going to go through the crossover and kind of draw it out, I'm not going to give you the values, unfortunately. I'm doing this for a client, and this might be something that I offer as an upgrade kit for the 66, because the tweeters are a problem these days. The mid-range drivers are certainly becoming a problem. So yeah, I'm sure you understand. Right, let's get some measurements finished. God, seriously, I've ended up with stuff everywhere and round there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it's a new day. I spent pretty much all of yesterday designing the crossover for the new tweeter, new mid-range, and to sort of make some overall improvements, and got my components all out ready. So today it's time to get the crossovers put together, and I'll be listening to them this evening, and then if I need to make any tweaks I will do. But I did spend a bit of time yesterday listening to them as well. I showed a quick sound clip of some good old techno, and yeah, and also I was listening to things like Billy Joel, Always a Woman, a few tracks that I know have kind of highlight speaker issues. So I was going through those, making adjustments on the fly, which I like to do once I get the crossover design pretty much 90% there. So yeah, it's all about listening as well as the measuring. So to do those both together is pretty good, really. Right, let's go through what the differences are now. This mid and tweeter with a new crossover is a hell of an improvement over a 66. It really is. I'm really looking forward to listening to them later. So this is your Ditton 66 standard crossover. Woofer circuit, quite an aggressive fourth order circuit on the woofer. Really at about 600 Hertz it is dropping off a cliff. So it's not doing anything much above that. It's a steep roll off. So we have a 3.2 millihenry inductor first, a 2.2 millihenry inductor, 72 microfarad capacitor ground in this inductor, 72 here as well. So kind of fourth order arrangement. Tweeter circuit, we have a 25 microfarad, sometimes that's a 30. I think the MF 500 used a 30, can't remember in all honesty. A 0.35 millihenry inductor into the positive of the MD 500 in this case. We ground this capacitor with a 2.2 millihenry inductor, and we ground this inductor with a 4 microfarad capacitor. So we've got a second order high pass, second order low pass, no correction or anything like that on the mid, which is why the frequency response is a little bit kind of like that. You kind of got the mid-range crown in here. There's no real flat top to it. So yeah, it's not the most refined circuit in the world, but it obviously does the job. Tweeter circuit, 4 microfarad capacitor, 6 microfarad capacitor into the negative of our HF 2000s. It's connected out of phase, and then we have 0.11 millihenry inductor on our tweeter circuit, third order on that. Yeah, so that's your Ditton 66 standard crossover. So I'll go through the revised crossover for the new mid and the new tweeter, but what I'm not going to do is give you the values. My client Steve is paying me to do this. This might be something that I offer as a kit for the 66, because so far it's turned out phenomenally, and I've had a lot of inquiries about it already. So right, so largely I'm still using a second order high pass and low pass on my mid-range, but the mid I'm using is got quite a nice flat response, so I can kind of play around with those values and get a nicer top to this, so we're more flat. And when I show you the measurements, you will see that we are. So I'm going to take the old values out. So I've introduced a resistor here to attenuate our mid-range, because it's a 4 ohm driver, not an 8, and it does have a slightly higher output because of that. I'll tell you that this capacitor has become a larger value than the original, and this inductor has become a larger value because the crossover point on the 66 between the mid-range and the tweeter is about 5 kilohertz, which is really high. And I've brought that down to about 2.8, which has made the integration and off-axis response much better. This inductor here has become smaller. This capacitor here has become larger, and I have a resistor here. So that resistor there, if you looked at my mid-range response, is kind of like that. This resistor here helps tame this capacitor on the shunt part of the low pass. Yeah, low pass. And I can shape that, flatten that off a bit. So yeah, much better. But the tweeter circuit is where things have changed quite a lot. So still a third order filter. This value has increased, so has this one, because it's playing lower, and I have a resistor at the front. But and also, sorry, my mid-range is connected out of phase, and our tweeter is connected out of phase as well. So larger value on the capacitors, the inductor value very similar, but what I've had to do is introduce a little network here with an inductor, a resistor, and a capacitor, and that's to control the tweeter's response. Looks like that without this bit. So what that's doing is bringing the overall level down and then allowing X amount above and below to go through without attenuation, and it flattens that out quite nicely. It's to an aggressive peak to just clip it out with a capacitor. I would need a large value and I would lose a lot of top end extension, and I want this, like the original 66 did, to sail way beyond 20 kilohertz, which it does. Yeah, and also on the woofer circuit I have put a fairly large value resistor across it, and the purpose of that is to clip out, or sorry, just to control some of the, bring down the upper impedance of the woofer. If you looked at the woofer's impedance plot, so we have ohms going up, frequency going up, it would look something like that. And this large value resistor kind of allows it to do that. Because it's a large value, if we're at 50 ohms here, for example, if that's a 50 ohm resistor, that's going to bring this down to 25 ohms at that point, but have little effect down the bottom. So it's like a Zobel filter. You'll often see them with a capacitor as well, to kind of only allow it to function higher up. But in this instance, it works better just like that, and it has no effect on the bottom end. And it damps that woofer a bit better. It's a bit more aggressive on the crossover filter further up, and it's tightened up the bass. So yeah, quite a few changes. I'll go through the measurements, but the other important thing is I've paid a lot of attention to impedance on this, and it's really good. The minimum is about 5 ohms low down, but from 80 hertz all the way up, we are, I think our minimum is 4.7, 5 ohms, and 9 ohms from 80 hertz to 20 kilohertz. It's really good. So yeah, they'll be easy to drive with whatever you want to power them with. Here's the original crossover, which I think about 2 years ago I had these speakers in, as I mentioned in part 1, and recapped them, rewired them. Yeah, so I've cut some plywood, exactly the same stud pattern, because the only part of this I would keep would be the woofer circuit, and this whole section changes. So for the sake of a couple of inductors and a couple of capacitors, I'm just starting afresh. Plus I can orientate these inductors correctly. They're all flat on the board. And then Steve can keep these if he ever needed to go back to the original. I can't see why. Yeah, or sell them on as a refurbished pair of crossovers. So I'm going to lay everything out on this board, and then yeah, get it all together. That's one crossover built. Lovely jubbly. Yeah, I've done my best to orientate the inductors so there's no crosstalk or minimal crosstalk. It's quite difficult really, but if anything is in the same orientation like these two, there is a bit of separation there, and they're in very different parts of the signal path and dealing with very different frequencies. So yeah, it's not the end of the world at all really. Yeah, there's quite a lot going on that. Oh, good morning everyone. It's Saturday and it's a really nice day, so I'm going to spend the day gardening. So these are finished, and I set them up in the lounge yesterday, probably about 3 o'clock actually, and I think I turned them off at about 8 p.m. So I had a really good long listen to them. There's some crocodile clips out the side here because I was playing around with one resistor value that I was a bit undecided on with the new crossover. But yeah, largely I didn't really need to make any changes. So kind of out of the box, these new drivers with the new crossover, absolutely gravy. Really enjoyed listening to them. I'm very familiar with the 66. I've had I don't know, 5 or 6 pairs here over the years. I've done many a crossover and that kind of thing for them, so I know how they sound when they're kind of original and working properly. Really and truly, my lounge isn't really big enough for these. I measured it actually just to get the dimensions right. The ceiling height is quite low because it's a 200-year-old house. It's just over 5 meters, 5.5 meters in width and 3.8 meters in depth, and there's a little kind of wall in one corner which is coming out soon, but yeah, it doesn't help. So you can't get too far away from a large speaker like this, and these actually live in a really big living room. I think Steve said it's like 6 meters wide, 5 meters deep. which is going to be perfect for these. Really is. If you've got a pair of these, or you're thinking of buying a pair of these, don't put them in a small room. It will overload it. It really will. The main thing with a small room is this distance. This isn't a problem because you cross to this woofer at low frequency where the wavelengths are really long. That's not a problem, but certainly on the original 66, this is, if you sit too close to them, it's quite easy to identify both drivers individually, and that's not good. The more you get away from them, the less of an effect that has. And the original 66 used a really high crossover point between the mid and the tweeter, about 5 kilohertz, where that wavelength is only about 6 centimeters wide, and we are much more than that apart. So comb filtering up and down when you're too near to them is quite an issue. So with this new crossover design, I retain the woofer circuit completely. That was something I 100% wanted to do. The woofer, the base radiator, the fourth order circuit on this, I didn't want to touch. That's such an integral part of this speaker's sound. So I didn't want to touch that. This woofer rolls off from about 600 hertz, pretty steep. So I've integrated the new mid, which plays from obviously the woofer up to about 2.5, 2.6 kilohertz, because this tweeter will play quite low, and it's crossed around 2.6 kilohertz, something like that. So the wavelength there is much longer. It's like 12, 13 centimeters. So this becomes less of an issue, and that is really evident in the measurements. A speaker like this isn't so bad horizontally. You know, you're taking a plane down here, reference line, and then just moving left and right. You're not really changing the distance. Whereas if you go vertically up and down, you're getting closer to the tweeter, the mid and the woofer are getting further away. So that shift in distance shifts phase, and that can be a problem. But like I say, we've got a lower crossover point now. This is a small cone anyway, so at higher frequencies it's not beaming. Off axis is fantastic. So I'll put up the original measurements of these speakers, which were largely how a 66 measures. They have a few dips and things in. So I'll put that up, and now I'll put the new on-axis response in. And as you can see, it's a lot better. Yeah, it's much more accurate, and their impedance is beautiful, from 80 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. It's, I think, 5 ohms, between 5 ohms and 12 or something like that. I'll put a screenshot in. And the electrical phase of these all the way from 80 hertz all the way up is just lovely. So it's turned out really, really well on that score. Vertical measurements, here are those, and they really do stay together. Bearing in mind these measurements are at a meter, you might see a slight rise in the lower part of the measurements. That's floor bounce, and I can't really gate that out without ruining the resolution of the measurements, and you'll see I've cut them off at about 300 hertz. I'm not worried what's happening really below 500 hertz because I'm retaining the woofer band. So yeah, that's a bit of floor bounce, and unless I can take these outside, which I haven't been able to do, I can't really do a huge amount about that. But yeah, like I say, the woofer and the base radiator is all original, so I'm not really worried about what's going on down there. Horizontally, here are the horizontal measurements, and again, they just hold together beautifully. When you go off axis, these would be a speaker I'd be pretty much firing straight ahead. Unless they were near a sidewall, then I would toe them in a little bit. But yeah, I've never seen a 66 that measures like that. This has worked really, really well. Listening to them, it's evident that they are much more linear. There's more detail in there. There's more top-end clarity. They're just smoother and more balanced. and it's probably a psychoacoustic thing, but I think that's had the effect of tightening up the bass as well. These can be a bit woolly, but yeah, I just feel everything is really cohesive. Lovely. I played everything through them. I've got a couple of tracks that, well, I say a couple of tracks, loads that I use, and I'm aware of, you know, if a speaker's got an issue here or an issue there, certain tracks will highlight that. And yeah, they did a stellar job. I ran them on a few different amplifiers, which I wanted to do. They really liked my Quad 306. I'm a fan of that amplifier, and they absolutely loved that. They like my CXA 60 as well, which I think is a similar amp to what Steve uses for these. I think his is a bit more powerful, and they like that too, which is good. I tried them on a little Sansui, I can't remember the model of it now, AU101, little 10 or 11 watt thing, and because their sensitivity is still reasonable and the impedance is just nice and consistent all the way through, yeah, they vocals on that, they sang really, really well. So super mega pleased, and thanks to the 4 or 5, 6 of you that have emailed me about this conversion. This is something I've done for Steve, that Steve's paying me to do, but I am going to subsidise my time on his invoice, because I think this is really a good fix for the 66, because I've explained about the mid-range domes. You can buy second-hand ones. You're probably buying into the same problems. They're 50, 60 odd years old now. The dome rebuild kit, whilst I've never used it myself, I know 2 or 3 people that really know what they're doing, that have tried to use it, and it's no good by all accounts, and it's such an important part of the speaker. The HF2000, there's replacement domes for them. There's a dome that I like using, which is pretty good, but they're never the same. So yeah, I just wanted to put something together afresh. So a mid conversion, new tweeter, new upgraded crossover, a really enhanced 66. So yeah, super pleased. So tomorrow morning I'm going to give these a quick go cosmetically, a quick oil up. The covers just want a bit of cleaning and tidying up, and then they're ready to go back. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. Right, thanks for watching. See you soon.